Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, and welcome to another show. I have a great guest. Her name is Ryann Dowdy, and she has a company called Social Sellers Academy. And she has a really vast background in corporate sales, high-end sales, ownership of businesses, entrepreneurship, and they do social selling. And this is a critical skill for us to start to think about, to embrace as business owners. You know, for years, I've always said that the internet will change sales, and, you know, it did. And then the pandemic came along and changed it even more. And we must know how to use social selling going forward, whether it's a supplementary process for your sales efforts, or it is a primary for your sales efforts, depending on your industry and how people respond to that. But it is a great tool to not only gather information, but it's also a great tool for communication if you do it right. So we're going to talk a lot about doing it right here on this episode. Pay attention to our last point as well, which is, you know, are you right, or the people you're hiring, are they right for social selling? So social selling may have a different framework than your hunters, for example, have. It might be a different DNA altogether in the sales DNA. So pay attention to that. And let's go to the episode. I think you're going to really, really enjoy this, especially if you've been ever thinking, man, should I be doing social selling? How do I do it right? You know, what am I not supposed to do, et cetera. All right, let's go to the interview. Ryann, welcome to the call.
Hey, Doug, I'm excited to be here.
I really appreciate you being here. And I know the audience will too, because we're going to talk about something really cool, which is social selling. And social selling now it's really becoming, it's not even a thought anymore to me. It's one of those things that people are like, oh, should I do it? It's like, it's not an option anymore, right? Would you agree with that statement?
1,000%. But I will also say that it's not an either or, it's a both and, right? So like, yes, we have to be doing social selling, but it doesn't mean we totally abandon what has worked well for us in the past.
Yes, I agree with that. The interesting part for me is about, I'm going to show how old I am now, about, well, let's say in the late 80s, when dial-up started going to DSL. And, you know, for those of you who don't know what DSL is, it's an analog circuit. So I used to tell people, companies, I'd be like, listen, this internet thing is going to change sales the way we do sales. And back then they used to go, you're crazy, right? I guess it was kind of like more like the advent of the automobile replacing the horse at that point. But here we are now in 2021, and it's been changing for a long time. But, you know, especially with the pandemic hit and everybody going virtual, it's here. So for all of you naysayers in the past who are listening to this, you know,
Right.
So tell me in your words, if you would, what is social selling? Because, you know, it's so important now for companies to embrace this. What is it really when it comes down to it?
Yeah, Doug. So the way I always describe it is that, you know, there's inside sales, right? Whose primary sales tool is the phone. There's outside sales, primary sales tool, going out into the world, meeting people. right? And then now there's social sales, which means we're just leveraging social media as our connection tool. So, a lot of people get hung up on social sales in like the content marketing arena. And is this a marketing gig or a sales gig? And for me, like when we talk social sales and the way we teach social sales, it's not about content marketing. We're making the assumption that the company already has, content marketing strategy in place. And we're talking about how to leverage those resources by getting into conversation, building relationships, connecting with ideal clients, and ultimately, enrolling them in, our products, programs, and services.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute, because I can imagine people are sitting here going, that sounds great. I don't have a lot of content already built, right? Do I need a ton of content? Do I need to do that? I mean, what kind of content are we talking about?
I don't think you need a ton of content, but you need content, right? It doesn't make any sense to leverage social media as a tool, as a connection tool, if when somebody's like, "Ooh, Doug's interesting," and they go to check out your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook page, your Instagram, and you don't exist, right? So I think it's a balance. I don't think you need to be like, this isn't like Gary Vaynerchuk where you need to be posting 100 pieces of content a day, but there needs to be a reasonable amount of content that somebody can land on one of your social profiles, get an idea of who you are, what you do, how you serve, and show a little bit of your personality for sure.
Well, and I can almost 100% guarantee from doing this a long time that if we're selling a complex sale or a higher end sale, and we're working B2B especially,
sure,
they're going to go to your social profiles, folks. So there's no question about it. The CEO, the CFO, whatever level, they're going to check you out. And if you don't have something online, what you're saying, Ryann, it's so important. I know people who haven't got work because of that, or made a sale because they look and they go, well, there's no credibility there. I don't know who this person is. And in distance selling, building trust has always been important in sales, but in distance selling, it's even more important because just like going on a blind date, you trust your friend, but so, but if you don't know, if you didn't know your friend, now you're really like going, hey, how's this date going to go? And if you've known this person and their friend forever, and then you go out on a date with them, you feel a little more comfortable. It's the same thing, I think, with social selling. What mistakes are people making? Okay, no content or no presence, right? What other mistakes are they making?
So, I mean, it depends on, what part of the sales process we're talking. So, if we're talking the front end, the prospecting end of our sales process, right? So outbound communication and meeting new people. So let's kind of cover that specifically. So I think one of the mistakes that I see most often is that we make most of our outreach about us, right? We all have LinkedIn inboxes full of people telling us how amazing they are and asking us to book times on their calendar. So to me, that's like the ultimate mistake. Or like, it's even like, I'm even starting to get it, Doug, in the like connection request. Hey, Ryann, this is what I do. Would love to connect. Like, I don't care what you do. I don't know you. And I'm an open networker. Like, I love to network, but I don't care, and so to me, like, those are the very basic mistakes. Like, if we are just using this as like, if we're just using LinkedIn as a robo dialer, Doug, and just like, if we can just get out as many messages as possible and play the volume game.
Right.
That's where I think there's a missed opportunity, because what I think the power in social selling really is the ability to gather so much information about our prospects before we ever even get in touch with them, right? Like, I'm able to, ascertain all sorts of information about someone, and we should use that information to focus on connection. So I think that's kind of the ultimate mistake I see in social selling, is this idea that we, we're talking a lot about ourselves. Or I also see some mistake number 2 here would be copying and pasting, and I would say this, if you're doing this in like outbound email too, if every single message that gets pushed out the door is exactly the same, or the message could easily have been copied and pasted and sent to hundreds of people, it's instant loss of credibility. I will tell you, I'm going to show you an example of this. I recently changed my industry on LinkedIn just for fun. From like marketing and advertising, which is where I spent my entire corporate career, to e-learning, which there's not really an industry online for what I think we do, but just for fun to see what would happen. And all of a sudden I started getting messages. I see that we're both in the e-learning space together. And it's like red flag, red flag, red flag. Like clearly you've never visited my profile because I don't play in the e-learning space. Like you pulled a list that said I worked in e-learning and you sent that connection request to 800 people. And so those are the things that I'm seeing. And that's where people get really hung up. And I see companies, Doug, being afraid of social selling because of that, right? Because they're on social media, right? Because they're the decision makers in those companies are on social media and they have these inboxes full of terrible messages. And they're like, we don't want to do that, right? Like we don't want to be associated with that. That's not how we want our brand to look and feel.
Makes so much sense. We're talking with Ryann Dowdy of Social Sellers Academy. You can visit them at socialsellersacademy.com. So we're on the subject matter here of, okay, what do you do with social selling? And you got to develop a relationship of trust first and create a connection. You know, I teach people all the time, Ryann, if you're saying something, you want the response to be, wow, I want to hear more about that versus, so what, right? And so I was traveling last week. I was in Washington, D.C. My family was with me, and we're eating outside, having a nice meal at a restaurant. And this couple sits down next to us, and this gentleman is trying to impress this girl, and he is doing everything to talk about himself.
Of course.
Right? And I'm sitting there as a guy going, there'll be no second date here, dude, because you have no idea of what you're right. And as a guy, I wanted to reach over to him and just slap him and say, talk about her. Right. And I'm looking over my daughters and they're rolling their eyes and they're talking to each other. They'll never, this date's over. Right. They're saying stuff like that. And they're 19 and 21. So even my wife was like, no, right? So, and she's the most tolerant person on the earth. Well, she has to be married to me, right? So
I was going to make that second comment. I don't know you well enough to do it. So I'm glad that you did.
Feel free to banter back and forth on this. And so what you're saying is we have to develop a meaningful, trusting relationship on something that's relevant for the other human being that we're trying to contact. And that's really the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. And why do you think so many people don't do this? Because I agree with you 100%.
Honest answer, this one's geared towards my my sales leaders and business owners or people in charge. Unrealistic expectation of the quantity and quality of what the sales process should look like. So what I mean is we have these timelines, like we bring, this timelines of which we want our salespeople to be successful. And so salespeople come in and we give them metrics and KPIs, which 1000% I believe in, right? But the metrics and the KPIs are oftentimes unattainable to do by going deep with our prospects. Right. So if you're told, like I was in a Facebook group in my mastermind, someone's like, yeah, our sales coach is encouraging us to hire a business development rep to make 300 calls a day and try to set one appointment. And I'm like, that level of quantity, like I'm bad at math, right? But if you work like 8 hours a day and you need to make 300 phone calls, let's see.
It's impossible without an auto dialer.
It's 40 calls an hour.
Yeah.
That's 40 calls an hour. So how do I have time, Doug, to actually spend 2 minutes looking at Doug so I can say something interesting and personalized when I get Doug on the phone, right? Or in the DM or whatever. Like that's where I think the breakdown is. I think we do it poorly because the metrics and the KPIs that we have set up for our salespeople are unrealistic for us to be able to do that.
I would agree with that. And also providing the tools for the salesperson to actually be successful. So a lot of companies don't think about this, and CEOs, owners, hear ye. If you just took some time and put together the tools. Here's what we say here at this company. Here's how we say it. This is the content that you're going to put forth. You can customize it, but here's the basics of what it is. It would save so many problems for companies to do this. So I'm so grateful you're bringing this up, because it's one of my pet peeves in sales, right? Because a lot of times I'll go in and I'll assess teams, and just like you look at the sales and you go, whoa, it isn't the salesperson. It's the system or the process or the lack of.
Amen.
Right. So if turning people over is expensive.
Amen.
And so, if you have good people, we got to empower those people, but they don't always know what to do. They might be even top producers and they don't always know what they do. In fact, if you have top producers, what I have found is they will flush out faster than people who are not, because they look at it and they go, hey, I can't get the leverage here. I can't make the money I want to make.
Yep. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think a newbie will hang in a little bit longer than somebody with more experience. And that's such a big part of, and this is not just about social sales, Doug, this is sales across the board. And, one of my hot buttons and one of the things that we're really passionate about, we always say that our mission at Social Sellers Academy is to revolutionize the sales process, because we're a sales training organization run by a former sales rep. And I can tell you why, companies do and don't succeed in the growth of their sales team. Right. And oftentimes it is because of these things we talked about right here. It's unrealistic expectations. It's lack of tools. It's lack of systems. It's lack of training. It's lack of coaching. It's lack of leadership. And then we're all frustrated when, why are we not hitting our targets? Right. But then we've got a VP of sales with a $600,000 a year salary that hasn't talked to a prospect in I don't know how many years. Right. And we're like, why aren't we making any money? And I'm like, I have an idea.
I'm laughing because I see this every single week, or at least several times a month. And it's sad because, and it's interesting, with a vice president of sales, or, I love when they take a top rep and they move them to a top manager, right? And so they basically ruin two jobs at one time, most of the time doing that. But and we could go down that path. Let's not, because we'll just be commiserating. So I own a company, let's say. I'm listening to this. What we're really talking about, to me, is we're blending marketing and sales together now. There's not this divisional thing that used to happen, right? And that's the way the new era is going. So, but I'm sitting here going, okay, I want my sales reps to do this. Do we do LinkedIn? Do we Facebook? Do we Instagram? Do we Snapchat? what do we do?
Right. Answer to that question is, Doug, is where are your people? That's where you go. If your people are on LinkedIn, you go to LinkedIn, right? If you are a business to consumer company that sells insurance, LinkedIn works, but so would Instagram and Facebook, right? So it's figuring out A, what fits your personality, and then B, where are your people? I think in 90% of instances, again, it's pick the platform that you enjoy showing up on, and that fits the personality of your brand. There are some instances where it's like, yeah, no, you're not going to find that person on, or they're not going to be in the mood to do business on that platform, right? So, some people aren't used to using Facebook as a business platform. So, I would not use Facebook as a business platform for them. So I think that depends. I will tell you, in my first business, we just used Facebook, literally did all of our business through Facebook, through a Facebook group. It was really, really incredible. Now in Social Sellers Academy, we use all three platforms, and we kind of bounce around with our prospects, because we meet them where they are, right? So we identify the prospect first, and then we're like, okay, where does Doug prefer to hang out? Okay, Doug prefers to hang out on LinkedIn, but Sarah really likes Instagram. So we go and meet them where they are.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, we're building human to human relevant conversations. So where they are is going to be a relevant conversation. So,
and where you can get the information that you need to build a relationship, right? Because again, if you go to their LinkedIn and there's no content there, it's hard to find that connection, right? But if I can go to your Instagram and flip through your stories and, see you at dinner with your friend, with your family and different stuff like that, now I can create connection in that way. So we always say, like, just go meet them where they are.
So what I can imagine people are sitting on the other end here listening and they're going, okay, great. Do people really respond like this? Will they respond? Like, if we get down to human level, are they going to respond, or are they going to feel, like, hey, I've got some hidden agenda?
So it's a blend of connection and being honest of why you're there. Right. So here's an example. If I'm prospecting on social media and I identify Doug, and Doug is on Instagram, and I might start my message with, hey, Doug, I hope you and your family had an awesome time in DC, loved the dessert pics, right? That maybe you shared in your stories. And then I'm going to lead directly into, I'm reaching out because I'm connecting with you because, right? So I'm not like a weirdo, like, hey, Doug, what's up? Like, I'm, cause then you're like, what do you want from me? Right?
Exactly. Right.
It's like when they tell us more telephone prospecting, Doug, how we're not to be like, hey, this is Ryann Dowdy calling from Social Sellers Academy. How are you today? Right? Because instantly you're like, what do you want? Right?
Correct.
We have to kill the stranger danger as quickly as possible. So I'm reaching out to you because, and then again, it's really important in that because to not talk about yourself, right? Because I'm amazing. Like, nobody cares. I'm reaching out to you because I noticed you do a lot of travel for business, or it looks like, your travel was business related. And we're hearing from business travelers right now that are a problem for them. Is this something you're experiencing in your business travels, right? So that's kind of the approach that we take. It's use the human to human piece to make a connection, right? Or to say, oh, I love DC. DC is one of my favorite cities. Like, for me, I would say I used to work for a company headquartered in DC. It brings back really fond memories, right? Like, that would be my connection point to your time in DC. And then I'm going to tell you why I'm reaching out to you. And then I'm going to ask a question. I think that's, and again, this is sales across the board, is we always assume everybody has our problem instead of asking them if they have the problem, right? Instead of being like, I noticed you're a business traveler, you must be struggling with X, right? Like, I noticed you're a business traveler, and this is what we're hearing from our clients that we serve, that this is a challenge with business travel. Is this a challenge you're having, right? It gives people permission to opt in or opt out of the conversation, which again, makes people not feel so, not like you're so much in their space, because you're giving them an out. You're giving them space to say, hey, actually, no, I'm not experiencing that trouble, like that problem at all.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because it's really what I call permission-based conversation.
Bingo.
Right. So it's one of those things, like when I train, especially guys, when I'm training guys, because they can relate to this more. And the gals relate to this, but they're on the receiving side. Just go to a bar once and just watch when men go up to approach women at a bar.
Right.
And we just, I used to go and study this, because he'd walk up and he'd go, hey, oh, and he'd be, Rico Suave, right? And she would just shut him down, like, right. So my friend Dave came with me one time, and he's like, he was single. He's like, I want to go get I love these gals over there, blah, blah. And, and he said, what do I say? And I said, Dave, just walk over and say, hi, I'm Dave. I don't know if you find me attractive or repulsive, but I find you quite attractive. And quite frankly, what I was wondering is, could we set up a time for us to talk, maybe go have a cup of coffee, maybe tomorrow, whatever, the next day, whatever, and just take 15 minutes to figure out whether or not we're in the same space together. In other words, maybe you're looking for a relationship, maybe you're not. You can tell me right now or whatever, right? And he just goes and he just does that line. Most of the women said to him, pull up a chair and let's talk now.
Right. Like, who knew? If you weren't just a total sleazeball, maybe we could have a conversation. And that applies in sales too. Like, I get plenty of people in my inbox that I'm like, what you do is really interesting, but your approach is so sleazy that I'm just not interested.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're getting these on social media. So unfortunately, what will happen is it's kind of like we get numb to messages, because we see them and we go, oh my God, it's one of those, right?
Right.
So sometimes I've even missed important messages to me through social media because of that. Because you can tell, I can tell, we can all tell. It's a canned response. It's like and nothing will break rapport quicker than somebody knowing that you don't care enough to actually say something relevant about it.
Yeah.
And the sale's done. So if people are selling high end, like, I don't know, $100 million, whatever sales, right? Does social selling work for them too?
So it's an interesting question, because we get that, we've had a couple of people reach out to us about it. I always say, I think it can work as part of your long game. So we have one client in particular, she has two offers. She's like a lower ticket offer. And then she does have like an enterprise level solution for like the health insurance industry. And so what we leverage social media for her, Doug, is to build relationships with the stakeholders in the sale, right? Identify the stakeholders. We're using social media as our way to see what's going on in their industry, how they're marketing, what's going on for them. So we're using it more for social listening than for social selling. Just because, those types of sales are such a long game. There's typically so many players involved.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, if a company's entire, you're trying to sell a, marketing software to a company, like, and you want to know who's on their IT team and who's on their, whatever, it's a great way to do that than to try to use different ways to get into a company and to establish relationships with multiple stakeholders. I think the approach is just a little bit different. And like any enterprise sale, understanding that it's a long game. But most of our clients are selling solutions that don't, top out more than a couple $100,000. So, can I personally say, like, yeah, we've had gangbuster success leveraging social selling for enterprise sales. I can't personally make that claim, but I can see how, again, leveraging social media as that way to build those long-term stakeholder relationships would be valuable. And even leveraging the personal side of it too, because let's not kid, if you're selling $100 million solutions, it's a long sales cycle, right? So you do get to know that, oh, you guys go to such and such lake for the summer. Like, that's so cool. And then you wind up becoming friends, right? Because it's such a long process. And like I said, oftentimes that's with the stakeholder and not the decision maker. But I think that's totally okay to leverage Facebook as a way to humanize yourself and your company as the sales professional to the multiple stakeholders, like on a personal level.
Yeah. And I found on that level of sale, there's very rarely one salesperson selling to the company. It's usually a peer-to-peer sales process. So, I look at it as it's valuable to me. It's valuable as long as we put it in part of the sales mix. It's another tool of the mix, right? It can't be the primary only type process. I look at it as, in the old days, right? We used to go door knock years ago, right? And, and you'd have the no soliciting sign up and you'd be like, oh God, this person's going to yell at me, whatever. But you would still door knock to figure it out. Or you cold call, right? And we still cold call today. Cold call is very effective if people know how to do it the right way. So I look at it as it's kind of like a door knock. You're knocking on the door and you're kind of finding out, is the opportunity potentially here? Mm-hmm. And what people, I think, when they're selling huge things, like the people who aren't selling, billion-dollar programs or products or services, they think that the selling process is so different than selling a $10,000 whatever. Mm-hmm. And the reality is we're not selling to CEOs, CFOs, title. We're selling to people.
Right.
And all people are looking for two things: a professional return on their investment and a personal return on their investment. So I think social media is a great way of being able to connect that. And you can find out so much about a person through social media that you cannot find out in a dry cold call without having a long conversation.
Sure. And I think, and that also creates another layer of sometimes concern for companies, is like, well, now I have to police what my people are saying online.
True.
And the answer is you do, and you should be doing that anyway.
True.
But you do have to police what your people are saying online. And some of the ways that we have gotten around that, Doug, is like a lot of our clients and people that we work with will create secondary profiles for their people to use specifically for the business. So like my team, because we leverage Instagram a lot, they all have like Instagram profiles that are specific to the business. I also now own those profiles. So if they quit or leave, I still have their inbox and everything else. Whereas, when somebody is leveraging their own personal profile, I can't do that. So, we work with a lot of businesses who are creating like social media policies for their people, or creating profiles for those people to specifically use for their business.
If you're a company out there, because we're speaking with Ryann Dowdy at Social Sellers Academy, and that is such a big point, right? If you're a company owner, or you're a company stakeholder, or you're the person who's going to get sued and for whatever, you absolutely want to have some type of level of control and security over the information that is going out over the social media profiles or anything going on. It's no different than having a corporate cell phone versus a, private cell phone, right? You got to have corporate compliance. I mean, I was shocked because I helped a client about 3 months ago, and they wanted to do a 21-day sequence, and they were in mobile security, basically. I was shocked at the amount of people doing the research who at their companies are watching pornography statistically through their company accounts. And I was like, whoa. I mean, it was high. It was ridiculously high compared to what I thought it was going to be. So, unfortunately, you fire the person, but that hurts the company reputation. That can hurt a lot of different things. So I think what you're bringing up is so important. And a lot of companies don't think about it, especially when they're doing, 30, 40, 50 million or whatever. As they start to get bigger than that, they start to look at more of these things. But even a company that size is very vulnerable, because there are people who go up be saying whatever. And if you just don't know what it is, then all of a sudden the liability could come back and bite.
Yeah.
So,
that's a whole other part of, business ownership that I was like, kind of crazy. But I mean, it's not just your sales team anymore, that you have to police what they say, because anybody who says they work at your company on LinkedIn, can potentially create that same vulnerability. But, for us, it's really about making sure that things are on brand and being really clear. And I think that's important too, Doug, to really deploy a social selling strategy well, is there needs to be a consistent brand image across the board. So this is a way to marry sales and marketing. Like all of my team, like their social media profiles all look the same, right? So if you land on my profile or one of my team members' profile, it's all very congruent. Right. So nobody's like, who's this person? What's going on here? Like we're very consistent in how we show up. And so I would recommend that as well. And curating content for your salespeople. So again, it looks and feels. So whether I land on the company's LinkedIn profile or the salesperson's LinkedIn profile, that there is some consistency and I can tie those things together. Because remember, as humans, our attention spans are very, 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 very short and we're visual people. So we need to create kind of that consistency. So that's something to think about as well when you're deploying a social sales strategy.
And that's another very important point, because that creates trust. Mm-hmm. When we see variations in the theme, we as human beings start to question. Mm-hmm. And so if it's uniform across the board, I mean, think of, I don't know, take any company, Microsoft, Apple, whatever, right? Brand names, everything's the same.
Always.
And there's a reason for that. And in sales, like you said, marketing and sales are coming together, because marketing, I remember Jay Conrad Levinson years ago, before he passed away, said to me, he wrote a book series called the Guerrilla Marketing Book Series. And he said to me, Doug, marketing is everything that touches the senses.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And I thought about it. I'm like, that's right. It's like, how are your people dressed? What is the lighting like in your building? What, not just, your collateral that's coming out, right? It's everything that touches the senses. So from a sales perspective, we know that anything that heightens that to a positive is going to build more rapport. Anything that heightens that or goes toward the negative is going to start diminishing rapport and trust, or rapport in general, like trust and respect, is to me the number one thing that people buy. Mm-hmm. And so when buyers are making decisions, they like to do business, as it said, with people that they like and trust. But they'll do business with people they don't like, but they won't do business with people they don't trust.
Amen.
So, how do people get a hold of you? I like that because you have such a unique blend of, corporate experience, entrepreneurship, ownership. You run the gambit pretty much. So that's what I love talking about you, because we can talk about anything really when it comes down to it. How do they get a hold of you? What, somebody, hey, you know what, Ryann, I want to know more about you, more about, what you do. How do they get you?
Sure. So our website is dailysalesondemandforceos.com. So all of our information is there. You can always connect with me on social media. I'm obviously a very avid networker. So we are on Instagram at Social Sellers Academy, and then on Facebook and LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me personally. Send a friend request on Facebook or connection request on LinkedIn. I love to network and meet new people.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryann. I really appreciate you being here. Is there anything that maybe I should have asked that I didn't, that you were hoping maybe, or did I do a bang up job, so to speak?
You did a fantastic job. I will leave you with a piece of advice though, hey, what did we not talk about? So also understanding when we're thinking, because again, we're talking to, those of you that are listening here, you're a little bit larger organization that likely has a sales team in place who's either doing phone sales or outside sales or whatever for you. Understand that you can't always just take an outside seller and make them a social seller, or an inside seller and make them a social seller, because it's a lot of time on social media. Like, it's a lot of time on social media, right? So not feeling like, oh, just because this person is an excellent salesperson, that they'll make an excellent social seller. And also, if you're looking to hire for this role, be mindful of that as well, right? It's not always just the person who has excellent sales experience. It's really making sure that this person it really does like that human to human connection piece, can spend that time on social media, doesn't mind bouncing around between flat platforms, because it's a lot of dinging. It's a lot of notifications. It moves fast. And so just be mindful of that in your hiring process. It's not enough to just say, oh, Joe on our inside sales team, we're going to go ahead and convert him into a social seller. Make sure that Joe actually enjoys social media. And I know that is so common sense, but the number of people that come to us and say, yeah, we've hired a handful of people and they just couldn't manage the time spent on social. It was burning them out. So being mindful of that when you're thinking of how do we deploy this strategy, that sometimes it is kind of someone who is that special breed of person who doesn't mind doing that work.
I find this fascinating because it's something that makes so much sense that I think people would overlook, like you said just a moment ago, right? So there are different, I'll call them sales DNA profiles for hunters, farmers, right?
Right.
And so there's a different DNA profile, what I'm hearing, for somebody who's really geared to do social selling. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to employ a social selling, not just a strategy, but almost a social selling department or division or sales team, then they may have different sales DNA than your hunters will. And your hunters, for example, they might love going out and knocking on doors or cold calling or whatever, but they may not enjoy, or even it will fry their brain to sit in front of a computer and try to do the same thing.
Yep. Absolutely. I literally had a call with a woman last week who's looking to hire us to do some social engagement for her. Same thing. She's like, Ryann, I have a sales background. Put me in a room full of people. My close rate is through the roof. On social media, I hate it. So just be mindful of that in when you're looking at how do we deploy this strategy. So that was kind of not what you didn't ask, but that's the one thing we could have talked about is it as simple to just take what I currently have and flip it on its head? And the answer is maybe, but don't make that assumption without digging in a little bit more.
Well, I agree with you, and I'll disagree. It is something I didn't ask, and I'm glad you brought it up. So that's why, one of my mentors once told me, Russ Whitney told me this. He said, Doug, if you always have business partners that agree or team members that are constantly agreeing, mm-hmm. you have the wrong people.
Yeah.
So he said, you need people that have counterpoint. So I appreciate the counterpoint, and I appreciate you being here, Ryann. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I know people are going to get a lot out of this, and I look forward to having you back sometime if you
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, is that great or what? Ryann really delivered. She shared a tons of information. And what's really interesting about that is it's not that difficult to do this, right? I mean, when you think about it, it's really about connecting on a human relevant basis and having human to human meaningful conversations to build to a relationship. And, of course, we're going to discover whether or not there's a need or what we do. But the bottom line is that anybody can make a connection with somebody else. And if they do it in the right way and get permission-based conversation versus interruption, then that conversation should be pretty darn good. And those conversations lead to building trust, respect, and those conversations then lead to sales. So this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. If you like what you hear, please go up and give it a 5-star review. If you want to have anything that's in particular for something you're looking for an episode, just reach out to me at doug@businesssuccessfactors.com or my LinkedIn profile, Doug Brown 1234. And let me know what you want. If you're looking for help to grow your company, grow your sales, increase your profits, fix some things within the company that you're looking to fix, and you want help with that, reach out to me at either one of those contact pieces that I just gave you. All right. Again, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. Go out and sell something and make it a great day.